My sister raised a champagne glass at my baby shower. A baby at your age? Better hope he's not born wrinkly too. Her friend whispered, wasn't she on that fertility forum? I laughed, reached into my bag, and said, here's a picture of him. The room went silent as they saw his face and who was holding him. It's hard to explain how things got to this point, but it all started when I found out I was pregnant. I never imagined it would happen for me, at least not at my age. My name is Ava, and I've had a rough ride with love. I'm divorced, and while I've always been open to new beginnings, I didn't think this one would involve a baby. When I first saw the little blue line on the pregnancy test, I was in shock. It didn't feel real. I wasn't prepared for the onslaught of emotions that followed: joy, confusion, excitement, fear. But one thing was certain, I wanted this baby. And yet, not everyone around me felt the same. Beatrice, my sister, was the first person I turned to when I found out. I wanted her to be excited for me. Beatrice had always been the one who had her life together. Married, stable job, you know the type. Meanwhile, I'd been through a divorce, several failed relationships, and had learned to live with the idea that I might never have a family of my own. But when I told her, her reaction was lukewarm, to say the least. She congratulated me, but I could tell she was holding something back. Well, it's certainly a big decision, she said. At your age, a pregnancy isn't exactly the easiest thing. You've got to be prepared for some challenges. I tried to brush it off, but her words lingered. Over the next few months, I did my best to focus on the joy of this new life growing inside me. I felt a deep connection to my baby, something I hadn't expected. But it was hard to ignore Beatrice's comments, or the way she would look at me, like she was waiting for me to fail. Even when I told her I had hired a doula and started prenatal yoga, she didn't seem impressed. Her passive-aggressive remarks about how difficult it would be to have a baby at my age became a constant background noise in my life. Still, when the time came to plan my baby shower, I wanted to give it one last shot. I asked Beatrice to help. Maybe this would be the event that would bring us closer, that would show her how much I had grown and changed. Maybe she would finally see how important this was to me. The day of the baby shower arrived, and I was filled with excitement and nervous energy. I had invited close friends, family, and a few of the women from the prenatal yoga class I had been attending. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. There were balloons, pastel decorations, and gifts stacked in the corner of the living room. People were laughing, chatting, and eating finger foods. But then Beatrice walked in. She was late, as usual, but it didn't take long for her to command attention. She always had a way of doing that, flawlessly dressed, confident, and somehow always in control. Her entrance was a bit more dramatic than I expected, and she immediately started talking to everyone, making her rounds like it was some sort of event for her to shine. I tried to focus on the positive, but then it happened. Beatrice raised a glass of champagne, her eyes locking with mine, a smug smile on her face. Ava, she began, I just want to congratulate you on this interesting milestone in your life. A baby at your age? Well, I hope he doesn't come out looking like an old leather bag. But hey, miracles do happen, right? There was a pause in the room. Some of the guests laughed, though it felt awkward. But I could see the looks on the faces of a few others, they weren't sure how to react. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. Wasn't she on that fertility forum? Beatrice's friend Claire whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. I heard she tried everything to get pregnant. I froze. I didn't know what to say. My mind raced, my heart pounding. I was struggling to hold back tears. Beatrice had always been able to push my buttons, but this time, she'd crossed a line. I wanted to snap back, but instead, something inside me clicked. I realized I had something to show them all, something that would make them see the truth, something that would stop Beatrice in her tracks. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, scrolling to the picture I'd been carrying with me since the birth of my son. I took a deep breath, walked to the center of the room, and without saying a word, I held up the phone. Everyone fell silent as they looked at the photo. It was a picture of my newborn son. His tiny face was so peaceful, so perfect. But it wasn't just the baby that made the moment so powerful, it was who was holding him. The person holding him was none other than my ex-husband, David. There was a gasp in the room. Beatrice's face drained of color, her smile faltering. I could see the shock in her eyes as she took in the picture. "This is my son," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And this," I pointed to David in the picture, "is your brother-in-law. The man who's been there for me through this entire pregnancy. The man who supported me when no one else would. We're not together, but we've managed to find common ground for the sake of this child. He's the father figure my son deserves." I didn't add anything more. There was no need. The silence in the room spoke volumes. Beatrice didn't know what to say. I could see the embarrassment creeping up her neck, her hands fidgeting as she looked from the photo to me and then to the others in the room. She opened her mouth a few times, but no words came out. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The tension was palpable. My heart was still racing, but I felt a sense of relief. Finally, people knew the truth. The truth that I wasn't alone. The awkwardness lingered for a bit before Beatrice excused herself. She muttered something about needing to check on Richard and quickly left the room. I didn't try to stop her. As she left, I could hear the murmurs of the other guests. Some of them came over to me, offering quiet apologies for Beatrice's rude behavior, while others simply asked about David's involvement in the pregnancy. I didn't want to rehash the past, I just wanted to enjoy the moment. The day continued with a strange, subdued energy. People who had once been hesitant to talk to me now came forward, their expressions more genuine. Some even apologized for not understanding the complexity of my situation earlier. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. It was exhausting, carrying all that emotional weight for so long. But now, I felt lighter. As for Beatrice, she didn't reach out to me for a while. I didn't chase after her either. I had my son to think about now, and I wasn't going to let her toxic energy ruin that for me. But the damage had been done. That day, the veil had been lifted. Beatrice had shown her true colors, and for the first time, I realized just how far apart we had drifted. I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked into that room. I had found strength, not just in my son, but in myself. And I was ready to move forward. The days that followed the baby shower were a blur. I spent most of my time focusing on my son, adjusting to the rhythms of late-night feedings, diaper changes, and the quiet joy that came with watching him grow. But no matter how much I tried to focus on the positive, my mind often wandered back to Beatrice. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted permanently between us. I had received a text from her the next day, something short and somewhat detached. "I'm sorry for what I said yesterday. Can we talk?" But it wasn't an apology I was interested in accepting. I didn't need her to apologize for her words, I needed her to understand why they had hurt me. And deep down, I knew she probably didn't understand. Beatrice had never been one to acknowledge her own flaws, she was always the picture of perfection, and anyone who didn't fit into her idea of perfect was somehow less than. I knew this about her, and yet, I still held out hope. Maybe, just maybe, she would change. David, on the other hand, was a constant presence in my life. Even though we weren't together anymore, he had become an essential part of my support system. When we had split, I'd felt a deep sense of loss, as if I was starting over in every sense of the word. But time had passed, and we had both changed. We were able to talk openly, to share our hopes for the future, and most importantly, to be there for our son. I had to admit, I didn't expect him to step up the way he had. In the past, our relationship had been fraught with misunderstandings and hurt. But now, he was my co-parent, my friend, the person I trusted the most. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I received a call from Beatrice. I stared at the screen for a moment before picking up. "Hello?" "Ava," Beatrice's voice was softer than I expected, though there was still an edge to it. "Can we meet?" I really want to talk about the baby shower." I know I was out of line. I hesitated. My gut instinct told me not to meet her. I was tired of the drama, tired of walking on eggshells around her. But then I remembered my son, and I remembered the woman I used to be, the one who wanted so desperately to heal the rift between us. "All right," I said, taking a deep breath. "We can meet. But not for long." We decided on a cafe halfway between our houses, a quiet place where we could talk without too many distractions. When I arrived, Beatrice was already sitting at a corner table, her arms crossed over her chest. She looked more vulnerable than I had ever seen her, her perfect exterior cracked slightly. I sat down across from her, not saying anything right away. I didn't know how to begin. How could I? The words felt like they would get stuck in my throat. "I owe you an apology," Beatrice said quietly, breaking the silence. What I said at the shower was unforgivable. I was jealous, Ava. I was angry. I felt like I was losing something, and I lashed out. I looked at her, not sure what to say. Her admission was a start, but it wasn't enough. "Beatrice," I began carefully, "I've been through so much to get here. I thought you would be there for me. Instead, it felt like you were trying to tear me down." Her eyes softened. "I never meant to hurt you. It's just, after everything we've been through, seeing you pregnant, I couldn't help but feel like I was missing out. You had something I couldn't have." "I don't want to be the source of your pain," I said, my voice tinged with frustration. "But I need you to understand that this isn't about you and me. This is about my son. I need people in my life who are going to be supportive, who are going to be there for him." There was a long pause. Beatrice seemed to be wrestling with her emotions. Then, she finally spoke, her voice cracking a little. "I know. And I want to be there. I really do. But I don't know how. I've spent so much of my life trying to be perfect, trying to fit into this image of what people expect of me. I've always been the one with the stable life, and when you walked in with this big announcement, I didn't know how to handle it. It felt like everything I thought I knew was being challenged. I didn't know how to cope with that." I leaned back in my chair, processing her words. It wasn't easy to hear, but at least she was being honest. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, even if it didn't erase the hurt she had caused. "I just want to know that you're here for me," I said quietly. "I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be real." Beatrice nodded, her eyes welling with tears. "I'll try, Ava. I really will. I'm sorry." We sat there in silence for a while, both of us unsure of what the next step was. The conversation wasn't easy, but it was a step forward. I couldn't say everything was fixed just yet, but at least we were talking. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things could heal between us. But even as we exchanged our apologies, something in me still wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if this conversation was enough. I wasn't sure if it was enough to fix the cracks in our relationship, or if we could truly move forward. Beatrice had hurt me in a way that couldn't be undone with a few words, and deep down, I was still guarding my heart. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she could change, that she could be the sister I needed. But something in me whispered that I couldn't put all my hope in her. I had already learned the hard way that I had to rely on myself and the people who truly cared for me, not on the ones who had torn me down. When I left the cafe, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, uncertainty, and even a little sadness. I didn't know if Beatrice and I would ever be the same. But I knew that I had to keep moving forward. For my son. For myself. As the days passed after that meeting with Beatrice, I tried to move forward with my life. I continued focusing on my son and my newfound sense of peace. David was a constant presence, and despite everything that had happened between us in the past, he was there, offering help when I needed it. I was starting to feel like I could finally breathe without the weight of past mistakes pressing down on me. But with Beatrice, things were still unresolved. She hadn't been in touch much after our meeting at the cafe. At first, I thought maybe she was giving me space to process things, but as the weeks went by, I realized that she wasn't trying to rebuild anything with me. She had apologized, yes, but her actions spoke volumes. I could tell she was struggling with jealousy, not just over my pregnancy but over everything in my life that she didn't have. My son, my ability to rebuild my life after the divorce, and the way David had stepped up in a way she never expected. It all made her uncomfortable, and I could see that every time I posted a picture of the baby or mentioned something positive. The way she would comment on my social media with passive-aggressive remarks, or avoid eye contact when we were in the same room, it all started to feel like she was testing the waters for some kind of grand reclaiming of her position in my life. But I wasn't going to let her win. I didn't want to make it a battle, but I realized that sometimes people can only learn by being shown how to respect boundaries. Beatrice had never learned that, especially when it came to me. And after everything she'd said, everything she'd done, I knew I had to take control of the situation in a way that felt right for me, and ultimately, for my son. One weekend, I invited a few close friends over for a quiet afternoon. David was coming by to help with the baby, and we'd planned a small get-together. Nothing extravagant, just a few people to celebrate our new chapter as a family. I knew Beatrice wouldn't approve of David being so involved in my life, but I wasn't going to hide it. It was time to stop playing by her rules. When Beatrice showed up, uninvited but somehow always managing to show up at the wrong time, she walked into the living room and immediately looked around. Her eyes darted toward David, who was holding our son in his arms, cooing at him gently. Beatrice froze. Her expression tightened as she took in the sight of David being so natural with the baby, the way he had truly stepped into the role of fatherhood. She tried to make small talk, but her voice was strained. The tension in the room was palpable as she attempted to fit in, but you could tell she was uncomfortable. I wasn't going to let her cause a scene, so I kept things light. But I couldn't ignore the fact that she had been deliberately avoiding me, trying to drive a wedge between me and my son's father. At one point, she made an offhand comment about how nice it must be to have so many people around to help. Her tone was sharp, like she was subtly trying to undermine David's involvement in my life. That was when I decided it was time to finally show her who had the power in this situation. I stood up, walked over to where David was sitting on the couch with the baby, and kissed him on the cheek. Then, I looked at Beatrice, who was now standing rigidly by the window, staring out at the backyard as if trying to avoid the situation. "Beatrice," I said, my voice steady, "I want you to understand something. This is my life now. And this," I pointed to David and the baby, "is my family. Not because I'm trying to rub anything in your face, but because this is what I've fought for. This is where I'm going to invest my love, my energy, and my trust. If you can't accept that, then I'm not sure there's much more to say." Beatrice opened her mouth, likely to say something snide or sarcastic, but I held up a hand. "You had your chance to be part of this. I let you back in when you apologized, but your actions haven't matched your words. You've been passive-aggressive, you've undermined David and me at every turn, and you've made this harder than it needed to be. It's time for you to understand that your place in my life is not automatic. I decide who gets to stay in my circle, Beatrice. And right now, I'm choosing to protect my family." There was a long, uncomfortable pause. Beatrice looked at me, her face pale. For the first time, I saw a flicker of realization in her eyes. It wasn't a look of anger or resistance, it was something more akin to regret. She turned away, her shoulders slumped. "I didn't mean to make things difficult," she muttered, her voice barely audible. I don't know how to deal with all this." "You don't have to deal with it," I replied, my voice softening just a little. "But you do have to respect it. And if you can't do that, then you need to stay away. I'm done fighting for your approval." With that, Beatrice left. She didn't say another word. There was no dramatic outburst, no shouting match. Just her quietly walking out the door, leaving me to finally feel the sense of peace that had been eluding me for so long. After that day, things between Beatrice and I were never the same. She didn't try to force her way back into my life, and I didn't reach out either. There were a few awkward moments in the following months, but nothing ever came close to what it had been before. I didn't need her validation anymore. David and I continued to grow closer as co-parents, our bond strengthening with each day that passed. My son, who was growing more and more every day, became the center of my world. My focus was no longer on trying to fix something that wasn't meant to be fixed, it was on protecting the family I had built, no matter what anyone thought. And as for Beatrice, she eventually stopped commenting on my posts or making passive-aggressive remarks when we did have the occasional family gathering. I don't think she ever truly accepted my relationship with David, but she learned to respect it. And that was all I needed. I didn't get revenge in the form of cruelty or bitterness. My revenge was simple, it was taking control of my own life, choosing who I let in, and protecting my family from the toxic behavior that once had a hold on me. In the end, I didn't need to fight Beatrice for her approval or her affection. I had already won something much more important, my peace, my happiness, and the love of the people who truly mattered.